to invite to the stage the moderator for our next session, and I need to switch the slide, which I'll do in a second. No. Kube Ngaje is the AHS Board of Directors Treasurer. She's also the Executive Director of District Alliance for Safe Housing. She's going to be moderating our next panel, Voices from the Past. And we'll welcome her up to the stage in just a second.
Good afternoon, everybody. That's really tough act to follow. I'll make mine really brief. Like Michelle mentioned, my name is Kube Ngaje, and I am a board member and treasurer for the Alliance for Housing Solutions. When I'm not working in Arlington, I currently serve as the executive director for the District Alliance for Safe Housing. That's DASH. DASH is the largest safe housing provider for survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse. So I find myself at this great intersection of really working to address issues around homelessness, fair housing. When looking at when we were talking with our AHS board about today's forum, I really had to reflect on where I was coming to this issue. And for me, some of you probably know this, I was born and raised in Cameroon, West Africa. And so my walk in America as a woman of color has been very interesting. And I've remained very active in Arlington, even though I work in DC now, because in many ways Arlington is home to me. I worked for AVAC for 10 years, another really, really great, amazing organization that is committed to providing services for families here in Arlington. But how I even came to be a part of AHS was a lot of the families that we served at Arlington, housing was one of their biggest issues. And so I wanted to be able to serve those families in a different level, and that's why I joined the AHS board. And now, many, many years later, when I was looking to purchase a home, I couldn't afford to live in Arlington. So I actually purchased a home in Cheverly, Maryland. So I'm one of the people, from a housing perspective, that Arlington lost. But even as our distinguished panel today is going to shed some light on this, even if I was looking to purchase in Arlington, many years ago I wouldn't have been able to, because of a lot of the institutional policies that were in place that would have prevented me, as a woman of color, as an immigrant, originally from Cameroon, West Africa, from being able to create a home in Arlington for myself and for my family. So as we are going to delve much, much deeper in today, you've got the short bios of all of our panel members here, but I really want us to think long and hard about what diversity means to us as a community. In my work at DASH, housing and domestic violence sit hand in hand. And we know that one out of every 4 women will experience domestic violence, and ultimately that domestic violence is one of the leading causes of homelessness. So as we think about homelessness, as we think about fair housing, and we also think about segregation, how do those intersect? And most importantly, for us here in Arlington, how has our past informed what we know will be our future? So I encourage you to welcome our panel, and we'll jump right in. Hear me? So we've got Taylor here. We also have Ms. Clark Stevenson, Ms. Dolores Leckey down at the bottom. She's going to be, she'll have a station there for her to speak to us. We'll be turning the questions around, as well as Ms. Adriana Torres. Dr. Taylor, we're going to start with you. You were born and raised in Knock. Can you tell us a story about Knock that helps illustrate what life was like for you and for the people you knew during the days of segregation in Austin?
First of all, I was born in 1934. I've seen a lot of things. And in the Knock community, but the Knock community really was the village. It was the village aspect. Of course, everything had to be contained into the North community because we were not welcome in the other parts of the community. So the village had to band together to form their own everything from entertainment to housing to trust. The thing that I was most proud of growing up in the North, about 65% of the residents of North owned their own homes. And I was really proud of growing up in that village, by banding together. Their homes were open up. The kids were raised in a community atmosphere more so than just a community where people lived next door to each other. People were involved in each other's lives, and it made for a great. As kids, our communities tried to give us the amenities that other communities had. So life was built around the churches in the community who attempted to provide for that. Upon adult life, my parents gave me ground in Arlington, but I wanted to experience other things. So my wife and I moved to Washington, D.C. And I know that some of the same things that I experienced in attempting to buy my first home in Washington, D.C., when my first title had a covenant written on it, similar to the ones that were in Bellevue, Florida. The thing that it was that I would walk into a predominantly Greek neighborhood. First of all, some of those same pushbacks were there. The real estate agents tried to take me to predominantly African-American complex. As a young, industrious, cocky, young 20-some-year-old who owned their own business, was working at the United States government printing office as a journeyman printer, making more money than most people. I wanted to live where I wanted to live, and not where they wanted to send me. So when I moved into the neighborhood, predominantly a Greek neighborhood, there was a covenant. And this covenant read to the same one, like was mentioned earlier by Michelle, that was for Bellevue Forest in 1930, which read, no lot shall ever be used, occupied, bought, sold, leased, rented, or given to Negroes by any person of Negro blood or to any person of the Semitic race. The same type of covenant was on mine when I bought my home in the early 60s prior to the Fair Housing Act. So I experienced what was on the same covenant here. Happened in district, the covenants were outlawed. So it was just on it, but it had to remain on the will or whatever. I guess whoever bought my home. But growing up in the North community was quite different than what it is today. Because it wasn't a community then. Today it's called the North neighborhood. And someone said earlier that little things that people don't know what it does to the psyche. North community has always been in position where seemingly everyone else has to tell us what we need within the neighborhood. They're in the day of name changes. I don't guess anyone has ever thought that North is the only community that's named after an individual. Named after an individual rather than a community. Previous to later years, we were known, and we called our community Green Valley. We were proud of the name Green Valley. Green Valley meant something to us. But later on, it was changed, as I'm sure you'll hear later from Miss Kitty Clark. That's the same thing with wholesale. So we have to look at these housing things, these housing practices, leave a mark, although it's years later, leave a mark on the principle of housing thing. We are losing all of our residents in North End because they can't afford to. As Senator King said, the government is still playing role on keeping our areas discriminatory. First thing, most of the houses in North are zoned by the one zone. And that zone R27. That sets the minimum requirements that you have to have a 50-foot lot to build on. What happens to the lots that were given before all of these rules were passed, where most of the lots are 48 feet, which means that now a person has to get a variance. The county puts them through a big thing of $45,000 or $5,000 to get a variance, which was the money they had to put on the renovation of their house. So it's still little practices going on, although they're not as subtle as it seems to be, that are still keeping these communities. Because all of our young are saying they can't afford to live in Arlington now. So what is happening, because they could not afford to remodel the family home, because of all the requirements that you have to pay up front, they say, what's the use? That opens the door to developers who are now coming in. If it costs $5,000 for the permitting, they just put that on the back end. They're paying. So that means the North community is changing by developers who are developing all those family properties, making a rent off of them, because they're the ones who can afford to pay the exorbitant fees you have in order to remodel your own family property. Other things, there have been other too. I had to pay great money for my property, which my father, in fact, my grandfather bought the property that my home was on from the revered John D. Law in 2013. My property was bought in 2013. My family moved over from the 49th section of Washington to Arlington. That's the reason I'm in Arlington. But those types of things and those laws and things that are still on the books are not very friendly to the resident who grew up in North, which means that all of our churches and things are no longer community institutions. They have now become regional institutions because of the African American race returns home to take care of their activities. I too moved to Washington, D.C. When I got married in 1952, I stayed in D.C., although I paid taxes in Arlington, because my father, when I got married in 52, gave me the property where my home now sits. So Arlington became my bedroom community. I stayed in the district, but all my activity was in Arlington. That's still a lot of the dorm. Return to Arlington for the activities, but cannot live in the community where they were raised because of a lot of these things. But I find that the community is changing. But it's a community. It's not the spirit of the community. And I realize change is going to come, and I work for change. Controlled change. In other words, cultures have to get together, and we may have to come up with a new paradigm of how we do. The houses in North are irregular because of the laws then that kept us contained in them. They didn't care how we built the house, as long as it was within the boundaries of whatever it set forth. Now it's coming back. The haunted colony who's trying to dread and get some type of order to how houses are built and now Virginia being a property rights state, it's making it difficult in the North area to put it into a grid when they allow. As a case in point, the average street in my neighborhood is 3 blocks long. The average street is 3 blocks long. Now, if you live in the middle of the street, you have to go a block and a half to an intersection to get to your neighbor who lives right behind you, unless you cut this off. So there, I guess if you look, Arlington has more, North has more paper streets than any other community. The paper streets have now caused another problem because people have encroached on the paper streets. So you can never bridge. So growing up in North was quite a wonderful experience. If you read the history of North, and I have published a book, commercial, if you read the history of North, you'll find that the contribution that a lot of people from North made.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And we'll definitely have a little bit more time to go into some more details, but I wanted to pass this on to Ms. Kitty. You grew up in the Halls Hill neighborhood, a historic neighborhood you've heard about today in North Arlington. Can you tell us a little bit about Halls Hill Wall, what it meant to you, and how it impacted you and the people you know?
I have really tried to think of the most helpful way to have this conversation. When I think about the wall in Halls Hill, there's only 2 walls that I grew up with. There's the wall that's there at South Culpeper Street, and Michelle referenced that in her comment about how the Woodlawn neighborhood built that wall. Part of it's still there. We could only get in and out of the hill if you came out of Culpeper to Lee Highway, or Cameron to Lee Highway, or Edison to Lee Highway, or down to 16th Street Castle Hospital. Those of you don't know what I'm talking about. So you could only get in and out one way. We used to think so they could find us. But anyway, you could only get in and out, a certain way. And it really became a problem with integration of the schools, quite frankly. Because once the middle schools, and we all know about Stratford, and I was Swanson, holla, okay, that was the one that I helped to integrate. And then when they started integrating the elementary schools, and Bleed School got built there on the north side, then the kids had to literally walk almost to the hospital, down to 16th Street, over to Edison Street, up to Glebe Road. No wonder the children couldn't learn, they're exhausted by the time. And so someone had realized we need to help these children get to the school. So part of the discussion was, we've got to get another way for them to get in and out. And it really didn't become a big problem until the school got built again, and the white children had to walk all the way down. Now all of a sudden, we could fix it. I'm just saying. I never like that. I'm just saying. So, there's this whole thing about that wall. But then on the north side of North Culpeper Street, there was the wall that surrounded North Culpeper, North Dinwiddie Street, that separated the colored neighborhood from the white neighborhood, where our historic fire station 8 is still located up there in that area. And that wall was to separate, again, the races, because the residents were afraid to live where we lived, and I'm still struggling to understand all of it, although we really know what it's about. But be that as it may, I can remember my father, who was a fire captain there at Fire Station 8, telling the story about how much they had to stay up all night and bang their pans on the roof of the fire station because of the segregated Jim Crow laws, and Senator King talked about those today as well. They literally could not go around the block and put out a fire because they were black and the residents were white. And that is a heartbreak to me even today. I'm not going to tell them what the other for. That's a heartbreak even to me today, that's still so much of what it was. And even when I was born, I couldn't even be born in Arlington County Hospital because my mother couldn't have me on the maternity ward, so to speak. So I was born in Washington, D.C., but born back across the bridge And so my favorite songs about Arlington County, county born, county bred, Philadelphia County did. So I'm here, I belong, I'm glad to be here, I'm glad to be a part of the community. So those two physical walls were our reality. But you know, Dr. Taylor, you reminded the invisible wall of Route 50. There's this whole mindset of what sort of place in this county that if you're on the north side of Arlington, 22207, 22205, 22201, you know, I mean, there's this whole mindset about what that means. But if you come out 22204, 22206, 22202, you know, you're in LA. I had to have a white person tell me what that meant. I went, we're not in California. I mean, I love California. We're not in California. No, I'm kidding. It's not like LA, that's like lower Arlington. And I went, oh, wow. I have learned something new about my county. I didn't know it was possible. But the walls, they serve purposes, and they do cause harm. They do cause damage, and they do have an impact. I had the wonderful fortune of growing up in homes that my parents and grandparents owned. I can remember being reared in a house with 4 generations of us. I can remember my mom and my grandmama buying the property next door. That was going to be her house. Our family grew too fast. We had to move into a house that someone else had built. While the nest egg, that money that you had to put where it needed to go, had to go for that and not on that property. But there were decisions about that. On the families of my mother and my father, we owned 8 different properties in Arlington County. I own 2. Do I want to live here? Well, I'm home. Yeah, I do. Do I own a property here? Not now. I'm getting old. I'm not telling. I'm getting old. And I don't want to have to shovel the snow and rake the leaves and change the light bulbs. I really enjoy living in a property where those things are done for me. But the wall that's in my mind, the wall that's in my heart, that's the reason I think it's important that we try to find housing that is affordable but also fair. And that it provides an opportunity for people to live where they want to live and not be forced to live into something because someone has decided that that's what you should have and that's what you need. So much of being told that. But LA, I love you. One of my houses lives in LA, but I grew up on the north side.
It's interesting that we're still having that conversation about North Arlington versus South Arlington, 15 years, 60 years later, because I certainly heard it when I was part of Arlington. Talk about churches and then being regional. I'm a member of Our Lady of Peace, and even when I was looking to purchase a home,
that was one of the main questions. How far away is it from Arlington? I can't afford to live in Arlington, but Arlington will always be home. And so for those of us who love and care about this community, it's so critical that we have this conversation about what it truly means to be diverse, what it truly means to be an inclusive community. And to that very end, we're going to talk to Ms. Dolores here. You participated in the Fair Housing Campaign in
1965. Can you tell us about that historic campaign?
What impact it had on Arlington and on you personally?
Thank you very much, and it's a privilege to be with colleagues like this. As you know, this forum is named for my late husband, who did a lot to promote affordable housing particularly. The Fair Housing Campaign started with a prologue in my life. I'm a Roman Catholic, as Senator Kaine is, and I wanted to have, in the early 60s, I was from New York, and I suppose I thought you could get things done right away. And so I decided what we needed in the church I was going to, St. Thomas More, which is now the cathedral, but was then kind of a basement church, is that we needed someone from the Catholic Interracial Council to come and talk to us about issues about segregation and justice and so forth. And the priests agreed with me, and then I got a call from the Council of Catholic Women, I'm sorry to say, telling me that I was stirring up trouble and that this was not a good idea. So then the priests advised me to make a journey to Our Lady Queen of Peace in South Arlington. And I remember going on an October night, and there were walls, or there were barriers of some kind, and I didn't know, as I was planning to go over to talk to the pastor there, who I really thought was going to give me lessons in community organizing. Didn't turn out that way. My husband had been at the Martin Luther King March, and he said to me, I can tell you how to get in past some of those walls. So he gave me directions. He stayed home with our 4 very young children while I approached Our Lady Queen of Peace. There was one person there, Father David Ray. I had phoned ahead. He knew why I was coming. I rang the doorbell, and he arrived at the door, at the threshold, wearing a long cassock, which is what priests used to wear, with lots of buttons down the front, and he was reading aloud from Langston Hughes' poetry. He didn't say hello, he didn't say come in, he just continued to read, and the poem was, "The Negro Speaks of Rivers." And there is a recurring line in it, "My soul has grown as deep as the river." Then he beckoned me to come in. We sat down, I looked around, there were piles of books, piles of newspapers, and he smoked. So he was flicking his ashes in there, and I thought, what have I gotten myself into? This place is going to go up in flames, and my poor children are going to be motherless, and so forth. So then after I sort of presented my problem to him, he said to me, you know what you need to do? You need to read Evelyn Underhill. I said, who might that be? He said, well, she is an Anglican woman living in England, married, and she's probably the best scholar of Western mysticism in the world. Where's the community organizing in this? I said, thank you, and I'm kind of eyeing the door. I'm trying to get out the door, went out the door. He said, come back and see me after you've read a little. So then I went to the library the next day. In those days, Catholics always did what the priests told them to do, long ago and far away. And so I went off to the library and looked at the card catalog. Any of you remember card catalogs? Remember that? Okay, there she was, 248. 3 books. It was very hard to find her books, but there were 3 books in the Arlington County Library. So I took the smallest one, which was called Practical Mysticism. And I want to say it really changed my life. It changed the way I looked at the world, the way I looked at myself, the way I looked at the community in which I was living. It was completely unexpected. So that was a kind of piece of my life journey when Joe Holy, many of you know him, asked me if I would be a precinct leader in the upcoming fair housing drive. Now I have to say, I am not a courageous person. I am not brave. The thought scared me. I was living in a neighborhood that was not friendly to these ideas. It was South Quincy Street. We had no sidewalks, by the way, which figures into the tale. And that, I really didn't know whether I could do it or not. But somehow, the echoes of Father David Ray reading "My soul has grown deep like the rivers," and the fact that what Evelyn Underhill was talking about was being united with reality, which is what she talked about, I said, yes, I will. Well, then I woke up one night and I said, oh dear, where am I going to get the canvassers? Because everybody I knew well enough was already involved, and my neighbors were not going to volunteer, I could tell you that. So then I realized that across the river were seminaries filled with young men studying for the priesthood, and some of them had been in civil rights marches in Maryland on the Eastern Shore. So I called 2 of the seminaries that I had a little bit of contact with and asked if they would present this to the student body. Well, they did, and the canvases arrived in yellow school buses on South Quincy Street on a Saturday. No sidewalks, no curbs, so they're parked up, And out came the seminarians with their guitars. and they were, ready for anything. So they gathered in my front yard, and we kind of briefed them, my husband Tom and I, about this. And off they went, merrily, cheerfully. The goal of the campaign was to knock on every door and get as many signatures as you could in order to have that as the database for the Fair Housing Act. Soon after they were gone, the police arrived. And the police said, neighbors called about these buses being parked here. And so then we called St. Thomas More, and they let us park there, and I think they gave the drivers coffee and donuts or something. It was a very exciting kind of time. When the canvassers came back, they were full of stories and full of tales and full of exuberance and ready to come back the next weekend to continue that. And then along with that, this was an ecumenical and interfaith effort. Now, our bishop, our Catholic bishop, was in Rome for the end of the Second Vatican Council. But I believe it was Joe Holy who sent him a cablegram and said, will you instruct the priests of the diocese, which was all of Virginia at that time, to preach on Fair Housing Sunday about this? And the idea was the Protestant churches were going to be preaching, and the synagogue that was on Route 50 also. This was a kind of a joint effort. So the bishop answered. He cabled back, and he said, will do. We'll contact the chancery, and the word went out, and so there was a kind of a united front. One of the churches involved in it was the Presbyterian Church on Columbia Pike. So put that little fact there, because it's an interesting connection, okay? And as Tim Kaine said, I grew up in a neighborhood like him. It was kind of an Irish Catholic ghetto. I had never been in a Protestant church, never. And so we were going to do nighttime canvassing, my husband and I with the Presbyterian Church, there were a few high-rise buildings, and we wanted to go there at night to get the people who were not available during the day. And they had a wonderful prayer service with great choir and lots of blessings and lots of encouragement as we were going out. And all I could think of was my mother in her grave, probably turning over, as had warned me about never going there, And then, we made friends who were different others in some ways. And one of the friends was a photographer. So when this was all over, Tom, my husband Tom, said, what we need is a family photo. So why don't we get the photographer friend that we now have? And so he came to our house. I have that. I'll put it on the edge of the stage, the photo that he took of our family. So there's that. 20 years later, the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing came into existence. You know how it happened? We were 8 people, 4 couples, some involved in the Fair Housing campaign. We had no money. We each put $250 on the table. We had $1,000. We didn't know what we were doing either. That was the other thing. And somehow it was being run for the first 2 years out of my dining room. You could not eat at my dining room table. And there were, there were setbacks, and then we would go forward a little bit. But if Nina Janapol is here, she can give you the information about how this has grown. It's a little seed, It's like the little green shoot that Senator Kaine talked about. And now when I look back, I see how each of these things is connected. And I would say there are 3 things that when you were involved in something like housing or the elimination of discrimination or the pursuit of justice, really, the pursuit of justice, is that you have to have your soul growing deep. And that's what Father David Ray was trying to tell me that time so long ago when I thought that he had lost it. He wasn't telling me what I expected to hear. That if you don't have that, you'll never make it. And of course, we saw that in the civil rights movement. How could they do what they did? because the fire was inside of them. That's how. And the second thing is that collaboration is absolutely essential. That we saw that in the Fair Housing Campaign, and we have seen it in the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. That this is a partnership of all kinds of entities that is now opening up homes. Home is a very evocative word, isn't it? Home is as important, really, as food and water and the essentials of life. So sometimes I think about this like the ancient myth of the golden thread. You know, there is this myth that there's a golden thread in all of us, and it begins, and one thing leads to another, and as Senator Kane said, it's not really happenstance. It's just that you're open to the new experience, and it goes and it goes. It's not unlike Einstein's propositions, which are everything's connected and everything's going somewhere. And we just need to be open to that whole possibility. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dolores. That ties in perfectly to our next question for Adriana. Am I saying that right? Is it Adriana? It's okay. My name is Kube. I get that all the time. But we've talked about walls. We've talked about how far we've come in 50, 60 years, but we've also talked about how far we've not come in 50, 60 years. You grew up in South Arlington in the post-civil rights era that was very different from what we've been discussing. How was it different, and how are things still changing, and how is that change affecting you and your family?
Okay. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but here. Sorry. So I've been thinking about this because people have asked me multiple times how it was different when I grew up. And I guess I thought, it's a hard question because I assumed everybody had the same experience, but it's not true. So I grew up in 22204, which is I think still one of the most diverse zip codes in all of the United States. And in one word I can say, there was no fear. I didn't know fear. I can walk up to anyone of any background, of any height. I'm short, so, you know, it matters. And it could be male, female, it could be Muslim, black, Hispanic, white. It did not matter because everybody was different. The texture, like it is now, it makes me smile to actually look out in the audience and see that there's just like so many different people. And I don't think I ever experienced any kind of discrimination until probably after college, you know, and I realized that I grew up in sort of a little bubble that is Arlington County, that is diverse. And I think it was my first job as an intern, someone made a comment about whether my people would learn English. And my boss was Jewish at the time, and her jaw dropped, and I just paused because I just realized, I think I just got discriminated. Something just happened. And so I said, well, you know, don't mind. I said, if you need help translating, just call me. You know, so yeah, I guess it's weird to me for people to ask me, what was it like? Because I guess I thought that was normal, to just be able to walk up to anyone and know that that person had something to give me and I had something to give them. That person was just as smart as I was in a different way. That I, you know, like I didn't feel like I can walk into a room now with projects and they're all sitting, like they're all men, they're all taller than me. And it is a little nerve-wracking, but I know that I'm there for a reason. And if I didn't grow up in Arlington, if I didn't have that background where I know that my voice matters, where I had people just say, you have to say something, just say it. You know, don't be afraid. I wouldn't be able to be a bridge. I literally am a bridge between construction workers that are struggling with English and superintendents that are trying to finish a project and don't know how to communicate with construction workers. You know, so yeah, it's interesting to me. It saddens me nowadays because I've seen the difference. I've seen the conversations of whether we need affordable housing, whether diversity is important. And so much so that I actually had to Google, why is diversity important at one point? Because, you know, how do I explain this to people? And it really is that when you are in a diverse community, there's no fear. You can walk up to people, but you also learn about yourself. You realize, I am not like this person in these ways, but I am strong in these other ways. You know, and it just doesn't, it boggles my mind that it's still a discussion, to be honest.
I think that's one of the really hard things we had to grapple with as a board member at AHS, is when we were trying to put this together, and Michelle and our amazing team did a knockout job, was, are we being honest with ourselves as a community? Arlington has a phenomenal mission statement, and our vision is of being a diverse and inclusive world-class community. Are we truly listening to the voices of communities like Knock, of Halls Hill? Have we lost that sense of community? What does it truly mean to be diverse? And do we have policies in place that are negating some of the great work that has been done over the past 50, 60 years? So we've got a couple of minutes left for this panel, actually 2 minutes. I'm just going to give each panelist 1 minute to quickly sum up your thoughts. If you could sum up your thoughts in one word, what lesson have you learned from the past that housing advocates need to consider as we continue working on this issue to improve access, opportunity, and inclusion, making sure that Arlington truly is for everyone?
Come to the table. More than one word, but you gotta show up.
Yeah, a phrase. Let's do a phrase. Come to the table. Thank you. Stop.
I agree, we have to have more conversation, and it's about more than where the physical elements are placed, as much as it is about a holistic type of thing that takes into feelings, things of that nature, because housing has displaced a whole lot of families that you can never get that family spirit back. So it is about more than just how many people can live next door, or where you place the physical building.
So I actually studied architecture, and I've been through a lot of meetings like whether affordable housing should be included as part of the project. And I think not just building officials, but the community need to ask themselves, if we have these beautiful, wonderful buildings that do not have affordable housing, what are we losing? You know.
And I would say that small steps matter. And if you just follow that golden thread, the vision is at the other end.
I just want to thank every single person on this panel. I know that it's been very informative for me. I learned a lot in just getting together with each member here and trying to really piece this together. I walk away sort of challenging myself to think more, to think beyond affordable, to think about fair, and also to think about the ways in which every single person in this room can be a part of the solution, and not just talking about it, but actually taking action steps to end it. So thank you all.
Thank you.